The builder arrived on a Thursday morning with 3 workers and a measuring tape, and the particular energy of a man who has been paid a deposit and intends to earn it. Kwame Boateng stood in the compound of his father's house, his house, as he had been calling it since the funeral, and directed the builder toward the back wall where the new foundation would go. He had a vision for the place. Tear down the old structure, build something proper, 2 stories, modern finishes. The kind of house that announced what the Boateng family had become. The neighbours had come out to watch, as neighbours do when construction begins. Auntie Efua from number 7 was there with her arms folded, and her expression that meant she was already thinking something she hadn't said yet. Mr. Isaac Asare, the builder, looked at the site, then he looked at the papers Kwame had given him. Then he looked at the papers again, more carefully, the way a man looks at something when he wants to be sure he is seeing what he thinks he is seeing. He pushed his reading glasses up from his forehead. "Mr. Boateng," he said. "Yes, this property." He held up the document. "The registered owner on this deed, it's not you." Kwame looked at him. "What?" "The name on the land certificate." Mr. Asare turned the document so Kwame could see it. "Ama Adwa Boateng, that's your sister." The compound went very quiet. Auntie Efua unfolded her arms. Then she folded them again. Then she looked at the sky as if she was checking the weather, which she was not. Kwame looked at the document for a long time. Then he looked at the house. Then he looked at the door of the house, behind which, at that exact moment, his sister Ama was making tea and listening to the silence that had just fallen over the compound she had lived in for 10 years while he was in Accra. Let me tell you about the Boateng family before we get to the compound, the builder, and the moment everything changed. Because this story doesn't make sense unless you understand what staying actually cost. Kofi Boateng Sr. was a retired primary school headmaster who had lived in the same house in Kumasi for 42 years. He had 3 children. Kwame, the eldest, followed 2 years later by Mensa, and then Ama born last, a girl, the youngest, which in a Ghanaian family of that generation meant that her position in the household hierarchy was understood before she was old enough to understand it herself. Kwame went to university in Accra, studied business, and stayed. He built a successful logistics company over 20 years, not enormous, but solid, the kind of business that generates real money and a certain kind of status. He sent money home every month without fail. He called his father every Sunday. He was, by every measure anyone in his social circle would apply, a dutiful son. The problem was not that Kwame was a bad man. The problem was that Kwame had constructed an entire understanding of his family position from a distance, using money as the primary currency of contribution, and had never examined whether that was the only currency that mattered. Mensa went to Takoradi for work, also sent money, also called. He was less successful than Kwame, and therefore less confident in his opinions about family affairs, which meant he generally agreed with whatever Kwame decided. This had been the arrangement since they were children, and it had not been questioned because it had never needed to be. Ama did not go anywhere. She had wanted to. She had a place at a nursing college in Accra in 2008, accepted, fees paid by her father in the specific way Kofi paid for things he believed in quietly, without announcement, with the careful precision of a man who understood that what you document is what survives. She had been ready to go. Her bags were partially packed. She had even bought new shoes for the dormitory. And then her father had a small stroke. Nothing catastrophic. He recovered most of his function within weeks. But the recovery was slow, and the house was large, and the brothers were established in their cities and their lives, and someone needed to be there. The unspoken logic of the family, the specific gravity that pulls certain children into certain roles before anyone has decided that it's fair, pulled Ama. She deferred, 1 year, then another. By year 3, deferral had become something else. She had built a life in the compound, a small tailoring business from the front room, a network of clients in the neighborhood, a relationship with her father that deepened in the way relationships deepen, when 2 people spend years in the same space without pretending that everything is easy. Kofi Boateng Sr. was not a man who spoke easily about what he felt. He showed it in other ways, in the care he took with paperwork, in the particular attention he gave to things that would outlast the conversation, in the way he sometimes watched his daughter working at her sewing machine in the afternoon light and said nothing, but kept watching. He watched for 10 years. And here is what I want you to understand before we go any further. Alma was not passive. She was not a woman who stayed because she didn't know how to leave or because she was afraid of something outside the compound. She stayed because she made a judgment one year, then another, and because the judgment compounded in the way that certain decisions compound, each year, making the next year harder to change, not because anything forced her to stay, but because she had built something real in the staying. The tailoring business, the clients, the relationship with her father that you cannot have from a distance. She had built a life. It was not the life she planned, it was the life she had. What Kwame had built from Accra was also real. The money was real, the Sunday calls were real, the business he had grown over 20 years was real. I am not telling you he did nothing. I am telling you that there are different kinds of doing, and that the kind that happens in person, the 5:30 mornings, the YouTube video about mobility assistance, the tailoring money spent on the back wall, is a different kind from the kind that happens through a bank transfer. Both kinds matter, but they are not equivalent, and pretending they are equivalent is how families convince themselves that everyone contributed equally when they did not. And somewhere in those 10 years, Alma would not know exactly when, until later, when she found the documents in the drawer of his desk, where he kept everything that mattered. He had gone to the land registration office in Kumasi and had the family compound transferred into his youngest daughter's name. He did not tell her. He was not, as has been established, a man who led with words. He simply did what he believed was right, filed the receipt with his other important papers, and continued watching his daughter work at her sewing machine in the afternoon light. He died in 2019, quietly, in his bed, on a Tuesday morning in March. Alma was in the house. She had been in the house. The brothers came home for the funeral. Kwame arrived first, on the Thursday evening, in a car that was newer than anything on the street and that the neighbours noticed, as neighbours notice these things. He was composed in the way that successful people are composed at funerals present and appropriate, managing the arrangements with the efficiency of a man accustomed to managing things. He greeted the visitors. He handled the caterers. He received the condolences with the dignified brevity of a firstborn son fulfilling his role. He also, in those first days, began speaking about the house, not aggressively, not with any declaration that could be taken as a statement of intent, simply in the way that people sometimes speak about things they have already decided, without having announced the decision the house would need to be maintained, of course. The old structure was not in good condition. Something would need to be done about the back section that had been leaking for 2 rainy seasons. He spoke about it the way a man speaks about a problem he intends to solve in his own house. Alma heard this. She said nothing. Mensah arrived the following day, quieter, less certain, doing what he had always done in his brother's presence, listening and nodding, and not contributing an opinion until Kwame had given him the outline of what the opinion should be. After the funeral, after the 40 days, after the family gathering where the customary drinks were poured and the rites were completed, Kwame sat down with Alma at the kitchen table and told her his plan. He would renovate the compound, build something modern. He had already been in contact with a builder. The family home would become the kind of property that reflected what the Boateng family had built over the decades. Alma looked at him across the kitchen table, the same table where she had sat with their father every morning for 10 years, making tea, talking about small things, and sometimes large ones. She thought about the drawer in the desk. She thought about the document in the drawer. She thought about what her father had done and why he might have done it without telling her. "Kwame," she said, "have you looked at the land documents?" He looked at her with the mild impatience of someone being asked a question that seems beside the point. "I'll handle all of that," he said. "Don't worry about the paperwork." She looked at him for a moment. "All right," she said. She did not tell him about the drawer. She went back to her sewing machine. She waited. She was, as it turned out, very good at waiting. Now let me slow down here because I want you to notice something about that kitchen table conversation. Kwame came home from Accra with a plan. He had already contacted a builder. He had already sketched out what the renovation would look like. He had already, in his mind, made the decision. He sat across from Amma and he told her the plan. He did not ask what she thought about it. He told her, and Amma said, "Have you looked at the land documents?" And Kwame said, "I'll handle all of that." That sentence, "I'll handle all of that." That is the sentence of a man who has arrived somewhere he has decided belongs to him and is organizing his management of it. He was not being cruel when he said it. He genuinely believed he was being helpful, taking responsibility, doing what an eldest son does. He had no idea, because he had not looked at the documents, because he had assumed the documents would confirm what he believed, that the person sitting across from him at the kitchen table was the registered owner of the property he was planning to renovate. Amma knew this. She watched him not ask. She watched him assume. She had watched men assume things for 38 years, and she had learned something important about assumptions. They are most powerfully corrected not by argument, but by evidence. Arguing with Kwame about the house would have produced a family conflict. Letting the builder hold up the land document would produce a fact. She chose the fact. Not because she was timid. She had sat with Kwame at the kitchen table and looked at him directly when she asked about the land documents, but because she understood, with the specific intelligence of someone who has spent 10 years getting things done without anyone watching, that facts presented at the right moment are worth 10 times the same facts presented too early. She went back to her sewing machine. She waited 4 more weeks. And on a Thursday morning, when a builder pushed his reading glasses up from his forehead and read out her name, the assumption collapsed, not because of anything she said, but because of what her father had written down, and what was therefore legally, irrefutably, already true. That is the thing about the right document at the right moment. It does not need to be argued. It does not need defending. It simply needs to be present when the question is asked. Amma had been present in that house for 10 years. The document had been present in that drawer for 4 years. And when the moment arrived that required both of them, they were both there, ready, in the right place. Here is what 10 years in that house looked like, before we get to the builder's Thursday morning. It looked like waking at 5:30 to give her father his morning medication before he was fully awake, because if he was fully awake before the medication, he would argue that he didn't need it. And the argument would take 45 minutes, and the medication still needed to be taken. So she woke at 5:30. It looked like the 3 months in 2013 when his mobility deteriorated, and she learned, from a YouTube video and then from a nurse neighbor, how to safely assist a man who weighed twice what she did from a bed to a chair to a bathroom and back. It looked like the sewing machine in the front room that she had bought second-hand and repaired herself and used to build the small business that kept her financially independent in a household where she was not paid for what she did, because care work in that context was not called work. It was called being a good daughter. It looked like the Sunday phone calls from Kwame, which were always warm and always brief and always ended with, "Thank you for being there, Amma," which was genuine and which never became, "And what do you need from us, Amma, to make this sustainable?" It looked like the rainy season of 2016, when the back section of the house leaked and she covered the important furniture with plastic sheeting and called Mensa to ask about repair money, and Mensa said he would talk to Kwame. Kwame said he would send something next month, and the next month came, and the back section still leaked, and she used her tailoring money to pay for the patching. It looked like the afternoons when her father was sleeping, and she sat in the courtyard and sometimes permitted herself to think about the nursing college and the dormitory shoes and the life that had not been lived, and then put those thoughts away because they were not useful, and the afternoon light was pleasant, and there was still hemming to finish before evening. And it looked, in 2017, like her father calling her into his study, the small room where he kept his files, his receipts, the certificates of his children's births and schooling and achievements, all organized in manila folders, and sitting her down and saying something that she had not fully understood at the time. He said, "Ama, I know what you gave up. I know what you have given. I want you to know that I know." She had said, "Papa, it's fine." He had looked at her with the expression she would remember afterward, the expression of a man who knows that it's fine is what people say when they mean the opposite, and who has decided that what he cannot say with words will say with paperwork. He didn't say anything else that afternoon. But sometime in the following weeks, he went to the land registration office. And I want to stop here for a second, because there is something about this that I find remarkable every time I sit with this story. Kwame Boateng Sr., a retired primary school headmaster who had lived in the same house for 42 years, went to a government office and had a property formally transferred because he had been watching his daughter work, and he had understood, without needing it explained, that what she was doing had a value that the existing arrangements did not acknowledge. He did not call a family meeting. He did not consult Kwame. He did not write a letter explaining his reasoning. He just went. He filled in the forms. He paid the fee. He got the receipt and filed it in a manila folder with her name on it and put it in the drawer behind the birth certificates, where a careful person would eventually find it. He knew she would find it. He knew she would recognize what it meant. He knew she would know what to do with it, and when. He trusted her with the truth in the only way he was fluent in, by making the truth official and leaving it exactly where she would find it when she needed it. 2 years passed between the transfer and his death. 2 years of ordinary mornings and ordinary afternoons, and the particular intimacy of a daughter and her father in the final chapters of his life, the kind of closeness that is not dramatic but is profound, that is built from repetition and proximity and the long accumulation of small moments that nobody witnesses and that are therefore, in most family accounting systems, invisible. 2 years in which Ama made tea every morning at the kitchen table, and her father watched her from his chair and sometimes said nothing, and sometimes talked about the garden or the neighbor's dog or the price of tomatoes. 2 years in which she did not know and he did not say, and the folder sat in the drawer with her name on it, waiting. That is a father saying, in the only language that outlasts him, "I see you. I cannot give you back the years, but I can give you the proof that they counted." Ama found the document 3 days after the funeral. She had been going through her father's desk in the systematic way she went through everything methodically, folder by folder, cataloguing what needed to be kept and what could be returned to the relevant offices. She opened the 3rd drawer and found, behind the birth certificates and the school leaving certificates and the receipts from the roof repair of 2009, a manila folder with her name on it. Inside the folder was the land title document for the family compound. The registered owner was listed as Ama Adwoa Boateng. The transfer had been executed in 2017, 2 years before her father's death, 5 years before the builder arrived with his measuring tape. She sat with it for a long time. She was not surprised, exactly. She had known her father was a man who documented things. It was perhaps the quality she recognized most clearly in herself, because she had learned it from watching him. What surprised her was the specificity of it. Not just that he had thought of her, but that he had gone to an office and filled in forms and paid fees and made it official, and then filed the receipt in a manila folder with her name on it and not said a word. She thought about the afternoon he had called her into his study. "I know what you gave up. I know what you have given. I want you to know that I know." She had said it's fine, and he had looked at her and he had not said anything else. But he had already done the thing. The paperwork was already done. He had been telling her, in the only language he was fully comfortable in, that he had already handled it. She put the document back in the folder. She put the folder in the drawer. She went back to the kitchen and made tea, and sat at the table and thought about what to do with what she now knew. Kwame was already talking about renovations. Mensa was nodding along. The builder had already been contacted. And Ama had a land title document in a drawer in the study, with her name on it, executed by her father 2 years before his death, perfectly legal and perfectly clear. She decided she would wait. Not because she was afraid of what she knew she was not afraid, but because she understood something her father had also understood. The right document, presented at the right moment, is more powerful than any argument. She did not need to argue with Kwame. She did not need to confront him or explain or defend herself. She simply needed to let the moment arrive when the document would speak for itself. She had learned this from the man who had taught her everything she knew about the weight of what is written down. The moment arrived on a Thursday morning, 4 weeks after the funeral, when a builder pushed his reading glasses up from his forehead and said, "The name on the land certificate, it's not you." And let me tell you what happened in those 4 weeks between finding the document and that Thursday morning, because those weeks matter. Amma went about her life. Her clients came. The sewing machine ran. She made tea every morning at the table where she and her father had sat for 10 years. She did not tell anyone about the document in the drawer. She thought about it every day steadily, from multiple angles, turning it over until she understood it completely. She thought about what her father had intended. She thought about what Kwame would do when he found out. She thought about what she wanted, not just from the document, but from the family, from what came after. She decided she wanted to keep the house. She had decided this before she found the document. The document changed only one thing. It meant the decision was already made, legally, and what she had to do was be in the right place when the right moment came to present it. She watched Kwame call the builder. She heard him describe the renovation. She listened to him speak about the house in the language of a man who has already decided, and she understood that the document in the drawer was not a weapon she needed to produce. It was a fact that would surface on its own at the natural moment when facts of that kind surface. And on a Thursday morning, it did. She was making tea when she heard the builder arrive. She heard Kwame's voice directing him toward the back wall. She heard the builder's footsteps on the compound ground, the sound of the measuring tape being extended. She stood at the kitchen window and watched for a moment, not with anxiety, just watching, and then went back to the kettle. She knew what the document said. She had read it many times. She simply waited for the compound to go quiet, which it did, approximately 4 minutes later. She carried her tea to the kitchen table. She sat down. She heard the silence that meant something had been said that changed everything. And then she heard her name. The compound went quiet in the specific way that outdoor spaces go quiet when something has been said that changes the nature of what everyone present is witnessing. Kwame looked at the document Mr. Asare was holding for a long time. The neighbours watched. Auntie Efua from number 7 kept her arms folded and her expression carefully neutral, which for her was an enormous effort. "There must be a mistake," Kwame said. Mr. Asare was not a man who had risen to 50 years old and 25 years of construction by being confused about land documents. "Sir, the document is registered. The transfer was executed in 2017. There is a receipt number here." He tapped the paper. "If you believe there is an error, you can take it to the Lands Commission. But I cannot begin construction on land I don't have authorization from the registered owner to work on." Kwame turned toward the house. "Amma." The door opened. Amma came out, not hurrying, not performing, just stepping into the compound the way she had stepped into it every morning for 10 years. She was carrying nothing. She had not brought the document. She didn't need it. The builder already had a copy. She stood in the compound in the morning light and looked at her brother. "When did you know?" he asked. 3 days after the funeral," she said. "And you said nothing." "You said you would handle the paperwork," she said. "So I waited." Kwame was quiet for a moment. Around them, the compound was still the builder and his workers standing at a respectful distance, the neighbours pretending not to be listening while listening with complete attention, Auntie Efua having given up the pretense of neutrality and simply watching. Mensa, who had come out of the house when he heard the silence, stood in the doorway. He looked at Kwame. He looked at Amma. He looked at the ground. Then he said, quietly, in the voice he used when he was saying something he had been thinking for a long time, "Papa always said she was the one who was really here." Kwame looked at him. "He said it to me in Accra," Mensa said, "on the phone 2 years before he died. He said, "Ama is the one who is really here." I didn't understand what he meant at the time. The compound was very quiet. Kwame looked at the document in the builder's hand. He looked at the house, 42 years of his family's life, in one structure that he had been planning to tear down and rebuild into something else. He looked at his sister, standing in the morning light, in the place she had not left for 10 years. He was not a bad man, that is important to say. He had not come home planning to steal anything. He had come home believing he was entitled to something, and entitlement is a different thing from theft. It is quieter and more durable and harder to argue with because it does not know it is entitlement. It simply believes it is right. But here in the compound, with the builder holding the document and the neighbours watching and his brother quietly saying what he had been carrying for 2 years, Kwame Boateng was encountering, for the first time in his adult life, the full cost of having been certain from a distance. And I want to be careful about how I describe this moment, because Kwame's certainty was not invented from nothing. It came from somewhere real, from a tradition, from a family structure, from decades of being the firstborn son and having that position confirmed over and over by the way his family spoke and the way his culture organized inheritance. He had been told, implicitly and explicitly, his whole life, that the firstborn son takes responsibility for the family home. He had believed this. He had built a version of himself around this belief. What he had not examined, what the compound, the builder, and the document were now forcing him to examine, was whether the responsibility he believed he carried had ever been backed by the presence the belief assumed. He had taken responsibility from Accra. He had discharged it through money and phone calls and the comfortable efficiency of a man managing a situation from a distance. Amma had taken responsibility from inside the house. She had discharged it through 5:30 mornings and mobility assistance learned from YouTube videos and tailoring money redirected to wall repairs and 10 years of sitting at a kitchen table with an old man who was slower every year and more silent and more dear. Both of them had contributed, but only one of them had been there, and the document in Mr. Asare's hands said, in the clear, unambiguous language of the Lands Commission of the Republic of Ghana, that being there had been noticed by the person who mattered most. And that noticing had been expressed not with words, because Kwame Boateng was never a man with surplus words, but with the permanent, legal, officially registered weight of a trip to the Lands Commission and a form correctly completed and a receipt filed behind the birth certificate's proof in the permanent language of official documentation, that staying counted. The conversation that followed happened inside, away from the neighbours, at the kitchen table. Kwame sat across from Amma, the same position he had occupied when he outlined the renovation plan, now with very different energy. The document was on the table between them. Mr. Asare had agreed to wait outside. Mensah sat at the end of the table and said nothing, which was unusual for a man who generally said little, but was at least reliably present when he did. Kwame said, "I want to understand what Papa was thinking." "I think," Amma said carefully, "he was thinking that whoever stays with a house earns a stake in it, that money sent from a distance doesn't replace." "I sent money every month." "Yes, and I used some of it for the back wall repair in 2016 when neither of you responded about the leak. And I used my tailoring money for the rest." Kwame looked at her. "I didn't know about the leak." "Mensah called you." Mensah looked at the table. "I may have," Mensah said quietly, "mentioned it once." There was a pause. "Amma," Kwame said, "I'm not going to pretend I understood what it was to be here. I was not here. I know that. What I want to know is, what do you want to do with this? And here is what I want you to pay attention to, because this is the moment where this story becomes something more than a story about a land document." Kwame asked his sister what she wanted to do. Not, "What is your plan?" Not, "How do we resolve this?" What do you want to do? The question of someone who has understood, slowly, in the preceding hour of his Thursday morning, that his sister has been making decisions about and for this house for 10 years, and that it is not actually his place to arrive and assume the role of decision-maker. Amma looked at the document on the table. She looked at her brother. She had thought about this in the 4 weeks since she found the document, on the evenings when she sat in the courtyard after her clients had left, and the compound was quiet, and she could think without interruption. "I want to keep the house," she said. "I want to expand my tailoring business into the front section. I want to repair the back wall properly this time, with the right materials. And I want the room at the back papa's study to stay exactly as it is." Kwame was quiet for a moment. "That's it?" he said. "That's it?" she said. "I don't want to sell. I don't want to share ownership. I don't want to negotiate. The document is clear. I just want you to understand why it is. And if I contested?" She looked at him steadily. "Then you would spend money on lawyers to contest a document your father made in 2017 with full legal capacity and proper registration, and you would probably lose, and we would both have spent years being angry about it. I'd rather not." Kwame looked at the document for a long time. He looked at the house, the walls his father had lived inside for 42 years. The compound where Amma had spent 10 years of her life that she had not planned to spend here. He picked up the document. He set it back down. He stood up. "I need some air," he said. He walked out of the kitchen. Amma stayed at the table. Mensa stayed at the end of the table. After a while, Mensa said, "He'll come around." "I know," Amma said. "He's not bad," Mensa said. "He just always thought he knew." "Yes," she said. "Most people who aren't there think they know. That's one of the things about not being there." Mensa nodded. He looked at the table. Then he said, "I should have come back more." It was not a dramatic statement. He said it the way people say true things that they have been carrying for a while quietly, without any expectation that the saying of it would fix anything, just because it needed to be said. Amma looked at him. She did not tell him it was fine, because it was not entirely fine, and they both knew it, and she had spent 10 years saying it was fine to people who had needed her to say it was fine. "Yes," she said, "you probably should have." And that was all. No performance, no long list of grievances, just the honest accounting of two people who were finally in the same room with the same facts. Kwame came back an hour later. He stood in the kitchen doorway and said, "I'd like to pay for the back wall repair. Properly this time." Amma looked at him. "All right," she said. He nodded. He went to find Mr. Asare. The back wall was repaired over the following 2 weeks with the right materials by someone who knew what he was doing. It did not leak in the next rainy season or the one after that. Kwame paid for all of it, not because he was required to, but because he had understood something on that Thursday morning that he had not understood before. That contribution is not only money, and presence is not only visits, and the weight of a decade of 5:30 mornings is a real thing, whether or not it appears in a bank statement. Kwame Boateng did not contest the document. He took his 3 days of needing air. He walked the streets of Kumasi, a city he had left 20 years ago, and that had changed around the bones of what he remembered. He called Mensa from a bench in a park and had the only completely honest conversation the two brothers had ever had, which lasted 40 minutes and covered their father, their sister, the Sunday phone calls, the monthly money transfers, the meaning of contribution, and the specific blindness of people who believe that sending resources is the same as being present. He cried at some point during the conversation. He did not mention this to Mensa. Mensa did not mention it either. He came back to the compound on the 3rd day and found Amma in the front room with her sewing machine, 2 clients sitting on chairs by the wall, a fitting in progress. He stood in the doorway for a moment. She looked up. He said, "I'd like to pay for the back wall repair. Properly this time. It's the least I can do." She looked at him. "All right," she said. He nodded. He went to find Mr. Asare, who was still willing to do the job with the appropriate authorization from the appropriate owner, which was now clarified. The back wall was repaired over the following 2 weeks. It was done with the right materials, by someone who knew what he was doing, and it did not leak in the next rainy season or the one after that. Now let me tell you what this story is really about. because it is not about a land document, though the document matters. It is not about a builder with reading glasses, though he is perhaps the most important person in the story. It is not even about Kwame learning something, though he did. It is about 10 years. 10 years of Kwame Boateng waking at 5:30 for a medication that her father would not take without an argument. 10 years of the sewing machine in the front room and the clients in the chairs and the money going into repairs rather than into savings. 10 years of Sunday phone calls that ended with "thank you for being there" without ever becoming "what do you need from us to keep being there." 10 years of a life being built inside the walls of someone else's plan and then, slowly, in the particular way that quiet people build things, becoming a life that was entirely her own. Her father had understood this. He had understood it from his study, watching her work in the afternoon light. He had understood it with the precision of a man who kept receipts and filed things in labelled folders and knew that what is written outlasts what is spoken. He had expressed it in the only language he was fully confident in: a trip to the Lands Commission, a form correctly completed, a receipt filed behind the birth certificates and the school leaving records, a manila folder with her name on it. He had not told her. He had trusted the moment to come when the truth would be presented by circumstances rather than by argument. He knew his daughter. He knew she would not lead with the document. He knew she would wait until the moment required it. She was, after all, his daughter. And now the house is hers, not just on paper, but in the way that houses belong to people who have lived inside them completely, who have carried them through rainy seasons and medication mornings and the particular weight of 10 years that were not the years they planned to have. The front room has 3 sewing machines now, one of which she teaches on. The back section is solid. The study is exactly as it was: the desk, the files, the manila folders organized in the specific way of a man who believed that documentation was a form of love. She kept the receipt. Like the Sankofa bird, Amma did not look back to return to what she had lost. She looked back to collect what her father had left for her. Not just a house, but the proof that someone had seen what she was doing and had named it correctly. That someone had looked at 10 years of 5:30 mornings and tailoring money spent on back walls and deferred nursing college shoes and had said, not in words, but in the language that outlasts words, "This is worth something. You are worth something." I wrote it down. She had it now. The sewing machine runs in the morning light, the same as it always has. Everything is the same. Everything is different. And the receipt is still in the drawer, behind the birth certificates and the school leaving records, in the manila folder with her name on it, in the handwriting of a man who expressed his deepest convictions not in speeches but in paperwork. She has not moved it. Some things belong exactly where they are. The house carries her name now in every way that matters, on paper, in practice, in the knowledge of everyone on the street who was standing in the compound on the Thursday morning when a builder with reading glasses said the registered owner's name and the compound went quiet, and Auntie Efua from number 7 quietly unfolded her arms and smiled.